Hello, thanks for joining. My name is Dugald Morrow, and I've been at Atlassian for about 9 years, mostly in engineering, but for the last few years I've been in Atlassian's developer relations team. Part of my role is to advocate within Atlassian for the needs of developers who use our APIs. Recently, we've been developing API design standards and other practices, which we are collectively referring to as extensibility standards. We use the term extensibility rather than API because we are concerned with more than just APIs. Whilst APIs are obviously important, we also care about how we collaborate with partners and the practices we employ to make changes available to partners. So the standards apply at a technical level to our products and dependent apps, and also to the ways Atlassian teams and partners work and interact with each other. In order to explain this, I need to provide some context around our experiences so far. Before joining Atlassian, I had read posts by Atlassian on all sorts of things such as agile best practices and Git workflows. I assumed Atlassian teams would be consistently adhering to methodologies such as Scrum, but in reality, this wasn't the case. Internally, it seemed closer to organized chaos. Teams were empowered to choose and make their processes, resulting in a very organic environment with little standardization. That was quite a while ago, but Atlassian teams still enjoy a lot of autonomy. There are many benefits of this culture, but as we'll see later, it also introduces challenges. At a high level, Atlassian is a product company. We have quite a few products with a lot of customers, but this picture is an oversimplification because Atlassian's marketplace is also a huge part of our success. Our products have rich APIs that are used by a large number of apps and partners. Lots of these partners are large organizations with many developers. In addition, there are a huge number of individual developers that create apps for their own needs or the needs of the organizations they work for. The Atlassian marketplace is one of the largest enterprise software marketplaces, with customers installing over 28,000 apps per week. But despite this success, Atlassian is still a developer plus company, not a developer first company. Most of the 10,000 plus Atlassian staff think primarily about products and customers, not apps and partners. To summarize our situation, we have a culture of independent teams, a large ecosystem, and as a company, our primary focus is on customers rather than developers who use our APIs. This has resulted in inconsistent APIs in terms of quality and style. There have been too many incidents that have impacted partners, apps, and customers, and there are weaknesses in the way we collaborate. Our hypothesis is that these issues can be addressed by lifting our standards. Our reasoning is based on the success of recent solutions and practices. To explain this, let's look at some of the programs that led us here. The first two problem areas I focused on were reducing the rate of incidents and providing better API changelogs. At the time, I had no sense that these streams of work would lead to a framework such as extensibility standards. They were simply problem areas that I knew we needed to solve. Reducing our rate of incidents involved a lot of Reducing our rate of incidents involved a lot of analysis of historical incident data and working with R&D teams to agree on how to define the various grades of incidents in the context of ecosystem. The work resulted in the standardization of REST API analytics, since this was necessary in order to be able to evaluate incident severity. We created tooling that is able to calculate the potential number of apps and users impacted by any endpoint regression instantly based on the billions of events logged every day. Along with this, we created the methodology for assessing the impact of an API change. The second stream of work involved improving our API changelogs. In 2020, we recorded only 5 changelog entries all year for our biggest API, Jira Cloud Platform. A number of other APIs had no changelogs at all. We now have comprehensive changelogs for each product, and a central changelog that all API changes roll up to. Developers can create subscriptions with custom filters so they are notified about the types of API changes relevant to them. Not only has this benefited our partners, this has also had a very positive side effect within Atlassian. Teams are now more aware of the need to communicate changes and consequently have a much stronger ecosystem DNA. I was initially mainly focused on getting the technical solution in place, but over time I became more and more aware of the standards needed to keep teams aligned on how to create changelog entries. For example, rules around picking the right type of changelog entry, formatting rules, and rules relating to amending published changelog entries. To ensure our ecosystem partners are involved early in the development lifecycle, colleagues of mine created practices that allows partners to review and comment on our API change plans, such as new API features. Pause. To ensure our ecosystem partners are involved early in the development lifecycle, colleagues of mine created practices that allows partners to review and comment on our API change plans, such as new API features. This is our request for comments process. It results in Atlassian R&D teams increasing their engagement with partners earlier, which leads to improved API design. As with other practices, there are a range of standards associated with RFCs. Around this time, we recognized the range of practices and rules we had created and started to centralize these to form a suite of extensibility standards. We are continuing to create and refine these standards. Our experience is that Atlassian teams have been happy to embrace the guidance we've provided, so long as it's pragmatic and the value is clear. They have especially loved guidance that is accompanied by tooling to make their lives easier. Our standards are adopted by teams, not imposed upon them. R&D teams don't lose their autonomy, but the standards provide alignment and consistency. The teams also get peace of mind that they are doing the right thing. Our extensibility standards are broadly classified into 3 groups: API design, API change management, and API collaboration. Here are some examples of extensibility standards. We have already developed quite a range of practices and tools, but we also have a long way to go. We have some gaps in API design standards because we've been concentrating on where the need is most urgent: API change management and collaboration. In general, there is a relationship between the types of standards and how testable they are. API design standards are easier to monitor and test, whilst collaboration practices and rules are often articulated in terms of soft skills and are therefore harder to measure conformance. An example of a collaboration standard is the rule by which changelog content should not have a marketing tone. This is clearly subjective. On the other hand, API design rules such as paths should be about case can be easily checked by tools such as Spectral. Next, I want to explain how we capture and manage standards. Our solution defines several types of standards, basically guides, rules, and definitions. Each type of standard has a different set of fields. This allows some standards to be very text-oriented, whilst others, such as spectral rules, are executable, although they still have a rich text field allowing the rationale behind the spectral rule to be provided. Capturing standards in a structured format such as this allows their integrity to Capturing standards in a structured format such as this allows their integrity to be maintained and allows standards to be evolved more easily over time. Like most things, our standards have a defined life cycle. The most interesting phases are from incubation to adolescence. The incubation is the state in which standards are drafted. It would be impossible for everyone within Atlassian to fully agree on all of our standards, so we only require rough consensus between a few experts. We use Confluence to align on standards because it requires a lot of written collaboration. Once a rough consensus is reached, the standard is copied into our standards management solution and it enters adolescence. During adolescence, it is expected the standard will need some tuning as it encounters real-world experiences. The other states are fairly straightforward and don't need much explanation. Of course, an important part of having standards is ensuring they are adhered to. We don't expect 100% adherence to all standards, but obviously we want the level of adherence to increase over time. Measuring adherence provides us with feedback. The data tells us what standards have the most and least conformance, and encourages taking action to either improve the standards or work with teams to improve compliance. It's interesting to think about the differences between adoption and adherence. Adoption is the level of awareness and intention to conform to standards, whereas adherence is the actual level of conformance. The upper right rectangle is the ideal place to be, since there is a high degree of awareness and conformance. The top left rectangle applies to where teams are aware. Pause. The top left rectangle applies to where teams are aware of standards and intend to conform to them, but the products and processes they use may need refactoring to increase compliance. The bottom right is where teams are not aware that they are adhering to standards. This usually occurs when there are strong idioms in place, such as pause. The bottom right is where teams are not aware they are adhering to standards. This usually occurs when there are strong idioms in place, such as most aspects of REST API design. For example, everyone knows to return a 404 error when something is not found. This is okay, but there is an increased danger of falling out of alignment when standards have no recognition. Obviously, the bottom left-hand corner is not the desired place to be. To be honest, we are still in the early stages of our governance story. We have some automated reports being generated, but we still need to work with teams to set gates and targets to improve compliance. This is a high-level illustration of our solution. The key components, including the standards, are hosted in a Bitbucket repository. Users run the Extensibility Standards Management web app locally to edit the standards, and then submit the changes in pull requests for review. Bitbucket Pipelines executes a range of jobs such as generating and publishing the standards documentation and reports. These jobs involve integration with other systems such as our changelog solution and OpenAPI spec server in order to gather data and resources to report on. As an example, here are the steps involved to measure conformance of our REST APIs to the spectral rules defined in our standards. The processing is kicked off by Bitbucket Pipelines in responses to merges to the main branch and a daily schedule. The next step involves querying the standards to find all spectral rules. These are then joined together to create a spectral rule set. The OpenAPI specifications for our REST APIs are retrieved and measured against the spectral rule set. The last step involves building and publishing the report. During all of this, I've learned several lessons. First of all, while standards seem like they should be black and white, my experience is that they are often shades of grey. For example, we need to balance the speed with which we deliver value with the impact on marketplace partners and customers. So as a result, our API deprecation periods vary depending on the circumstance. Our extensibility standards includes a guide and associated tooling that calculates the appropriate deprecation period based on information about a backwardly incompatible change. There are even shades of grey in the evaluation of whether a change is backwardly compatible or not. Even when it is clear a change is backwardly incompatible, it often requires judgment to estimate the actual impact likely to result. For example, perhaps the field is omitted from a REST API response. How important would that field be to apps? The next lesson relates to the challenge of getting adoption of our extensibility standards. Over 1,000 changelog entries in 15 products and services have been created with the new solution. R&D teams have created 45 RFCs with over 1,000 responses from partners. Our practices enjoy thousands of page views by numerous R&D teams, and our tools also get thousands of visits. However, there still are teams that don't recognise our standards, and every new standard will require an adoption strategy. Our experience has been that anything new must be clearly better than what it is replacing. Even then, adoption follows the typical S-curve pattern, where take-up is initially very slow, then picks up speed and finally slows down again. You need to start with one or two champions that are happy to work with you to help iron out any wrinkles. You can then run a program to onboard as many additional adopters as you can, but there will always be some laggards that are resistant to change. You'll have to be prepared to loop back from time to time to get them over the line. The next thing I became aware of is the variety of types of APIs and the fact that it's often the more obscure API types that are the most problematic. An example of an obscure type of API is what I call cardinality. Apps can be broken when a significant change in cardinality is introduced, such as suddenly invoking pause. An example of an obscure type of API is what I call cardinality. Apps can be broken when a significant change in cardinality is introduced, such as suddenly invoking webhooks at a much greater rate, or introducing a new kind of object in an API where apps were previously not expecting it. The incident analysis I did in 2021 indicated that authorization flows and front-end extension points were the most problematic types of APIs. Presumably, this is due to a combination of complexity and difficulty to cover with automated regression tests. The final lesson I've learned is that we've validated that extensibility standards has helped Atlassian, and presumably other organizations would also benefit from establishing extensibility standards. During the period we've been working on this, we've seen a significant reduction in incidents. Partner satisfaction increased from 68% to our target of 80%. And whilst I can't claim the introduction of extensibility standards is the only reason for this, I am confident it was an important factor. So to recap, within Atlassian, we've recognized inconsistencies were causing problems and preventing us from delivering value as quickly as we would like. So we've started investing in the creation of standards covering API design, change management, and collaboration with our partners. We'll continue to invest in these standards and our alignment to them, but we strongly believe extensibility standards are necessary for a healthy ecosystem. Pause. We'll continue to invest in these standards and We'll continue to invest in these standards and our alignment to them because we strongly agree. We'll continue to invest in these standards and our alignment to them because we strongly believe extensibility standards are necessary for a healthy ecosystem. So I'll leave you with a question. What is your approach to extensibility standards? I'd love to hear similar or different approaches, so please get in touch to discuss.